Dear students, so you are joining with transformation program which is conducted by Sri Lanka. You are with BL5 audit, business process and digitalization subject. So then we conducted series of lectures. So now today we are joining with section 11 audit documentation. So then we went through the audit journey and audit planning, risk assessment, and then audit execution and gathering audit procedures, and then audit reporting. All we concluded and we done with the audit journey. We issued audit opinion and now we are focusing about audit documentation. So then we are focusing now about audit documentation, but the message is we need to focus about audit documentation from planning onward. Planning onwards, we need to properly document in a audit engagement. It's part of audit quality. So කටිම join වෙන්නේ transformation program එකත් එක්ක Sri Lanka conduct කරන අපි join වෙන audit documentation කියන section එකත් එක්ක අපි audit journey එක ගැන detail කතා කරලා section සේරම complete කරලා තියෙන්නේ. audit planning, risk assessment, ඊට පස්සේ audit execution and audit reporting. එතකොට audit documentation කියන part එක critical part එකක් audit process එකේ. Especially audit standard auditing standard එකක් ගත්තොත් key elements විදියට තියෙනවා auditing standard එක audit documentation කියන එක critical section එකක්. It's standard වලින්ම require කරලා තියෙනවා audit documentation is a must කියලා, right? So as auditor, how we are complying with audit documentation, and it's a part of a quality audit. So then to achieve a quality or documentation, so then we need to plan that properly from first day onwards. First day onwards mean from audit planning activities. So then we'll discuss in detail about documentation, importance of the documentation, how we can do that. So what are the basic elements of documentation? So then we can discuss in detail, right? So then basically that's about audit documentation. So then section 11, we are remaining with another 4 sections. We can refer that later. So then we can straight away go to documentation. So as I mentioned earlier, it's a requirement from the auditing standard. Clearly we have a auditing standard 230, it's related to audit documentation, right? So as auditor, what are the areas we need to document? That's really important. So then standard clearly says as auditor, he has to document about audit planning. So the audit plan means nature, timing and extent of the audit procedures. It is required to document, and then the results of audit procedures. Results, once you are performing your planned audit procedures, what are the results? What are the audit evidence you gathered, right? So then once you are performing audit procedures, what is the results? The evidence you are gathering, the audit finding you are highlighting, right? And then significant matters and the conclusion you reach, and significant professional judgment, and then the conclusion which support to the audit opinion. That's the audit conclusion, right? All those aspects should be documented in the audit file. Audit file can be, basically audit file can be a kind of a hard copy file or e-file. E-file means electronic file, right? So some instance we are having hybrid mode. We are keeping some of the documents in a e-format, some of the documents in hard copy format. So then in modern auditing, we are moving with e-files. We are not using hard copies. So then big 4 firms and other firms as well promoting to do zero hard copy based auditing. So it means we are keeping documentation based on e-files. So basically we are having two mechanisms, right? So then once you are going through the standard, it clearly says what about audit documentation, and then it's discuss about clearly the audit working papers, work papers, right? So then once you are performing audit procedures and once you are gathering audit evidence, so then we need to mention that in a working paper. So that is called audit documentation, right? So after having more working papers, electronic or hard copy, so then as a combination we can say that it's a audit file. It may be consisted with different media, right? It may be a hard copy format, it may be a kind of a virtual or kind of a discussions, minutes. So then all those aspects we can call as a audit file. It's kind of audit folder, right? So then this is the basic understanding you should have of audit documentation. So that's the main content, right? So then once you are going through the detail about audit file, you can understand what are the elements we need to consider in a audit file, right? Once you are coming to audit documentation, audit file in process, we can divide it into permanent file and the current audit file. Why we are having a permanent audit file? Simple. If you are giving a kind of a external audit service, more than 1 year, so then for next year purpose, for the futuristic aspect, futuristic purpose, we are keeping a permanent file. So whatever the documents we are putting into this file will be can be used for the future audits. අපි මේ ඔඩිටර්ට මේ ඔඩිටීට මේ ක්ලයන්ට් සර්විස් එක ඉස්සරහා ලොන්ග් පීරියඩ් එකකට දෙන්න එක්ස්පෙක්ට් කරනවා. ඒක අපි ඉන්ඩිපෙන්ඩන්ස් සේව් වෙන්න ඕන. අපේ ලීගල් රෙගියුලේෂන්ස් වල කියනවා නම් අපේ within 6 month partner rotate කරන්න ඕන. audit firm එක change වෙන්න ඕන. ඒ comply වෙන ගමන් අපි long service එකක් දෙන්න expect කරනවා නම් common documents which will be used for the future audits, we are keeping as a permanent file, right? A file එකට අපි මොනවද දාන්නේ? Basic engagement letters for each and every engagement. That will be helpful to evaluate independence of future engagement, right? New client questionnaire. At the point of you accepting client, we complete a questionnaire to evaluate independence, whether we are accepting the client or not. Through this questionnaire, the answer should be documented clearly in the permanent file, and then the memorandum and the article and the basic information about the company incorporation certificate and structure of the company, board of directors, so then company profiles, so then those things can be documented, and then details of the history of the client business and board minutes should be keep in the permanent file, and then other legal documents, prospectus, lease and sales related agreement, even rent agreement, loan agreements, all those things can be. So if there is an acquisition group of company, those type of agreement, if it is a joint venture agreement, all those aspects can be saved in a permanent file. And previous year signed accounts, analytic review and reports to the management, and then accounting system, accounting policies, right? Previous year control questionnaires. So then all those common aspects can be documented in the permanent file. The purpose is this aspect can be used for future audits. අපිට මේ common documents set එකම අපිට future audits වලට use කරන්න පුළුවන්. එතකොට future audits වල අපිට මේ documents සේරම ආයිත් client ගෙන් ඉල්ලන්න අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ නැහැ. එතකොට client ගෙන් ආයෙත් ඉල්ලුවොත් client කියන්න පුළුවන් ඔයාට මේක අපි provide කරලා තියෙන්නේ. ඔයාගේ permanent file එකේ තියෙන්න ඕන මේක. Right? So then that's the purpose we are keeping a permanent file. So then in a recurrent audit we can refer the permanent file whatever the instance, right? So then 2022, 2023, 2024, whatever the critical document we are saving here, and then 2025 audit, easily we can refer this permanent file, right? So that's about the elements of the permanent file. Based on the industry, based on the company nature, we can add some more items for this permanent file. That's up to you to decide. So these are the basic elements of a permanent file. So then we can move to the current year audit file. What are the things we need to mention? What are things we need to include? Basically the financial statement. Financial statement we are going to base on, and the basic audit opinion, right? An accountant's checklist, a kind of a standard checklist or audit checklist. We can put that all the checklist. Management account details, reconciliation of management and financial accounts, right? Summary of unadjusted errors, summary of unadjusted errors, SAT template, we can say that, right? Whatever the critical review notes, right? Audit planning memorandum. On the other hand, audit conclusion memorandum, right? And then critical communication with third parties, expert and other auditors, and report to the management letter, ML, written representation, whatever the time budgets and related invoices, and board minutes, and some other details we can add here. Journal entry testing evidence, and legal confirmations, and bank confirmations. So then some other post balance sheet review documents, and third party other confirmations, actuarial reports, agreements. So then all those things may be a part of the current year audit file. So then these are the some of the elements, key elements we have mentioned here according to the nature of the audit, according to the nature of the company, that can be vary. The risk assessment related evidence, planning materiality calculation related evidence should be a part of the current year audit file. So then I think you are comfortable with the content of a current year audit file. Basically, once you are doing your audit planning, execution and reporting, what are the critical documents you have to make sure to keep documentation. So about understand the business, audit team details, independence related details, or planning materiality related details, every key aspect should be documented in the audit file. That's the composition of the current year audit file, right? So then now you have the basic understanding of audit filing process, right? You may have electronic version, you may have hard copy version, you may have permanent file as well as the current year audit file, right? So then we can go forward. So what are the benefits of having this documentation? So then as an auditor, can't we say that, so that we are chartered accountant, we no need to keep documents and we issued our audit opinion according to our knowledge and competence. So then we are experienced and we are experienced enough, so because of that we are issuing the opinion. We don't have any audit documentation. Can we say that? So what are the benefits? So then here we have a list of benefits having documentation. First one, so then here we have not mentioned here, so there is a kind of a regulatory requirement, right? As I said, is a compliance requirement. So compliance requirements to do audit in line with SLA US 230 as well as other SLA US. So the normally in auditing standard, you know that accounting standard we have sections, definition, measurement, disclosure. Likewise in auditing standards we have that definitions, and then we have that separate section documentation. So then auditing standard itself giving a high priority for the documentation. So there is a saying like not documented not done. So then අපි කරා කියලා බෑ. අපි කරපු දේවල් evidence විදියට document කරලා තියෙන්න ඕන. So then once you are planning our audit, we should ensure that definitely we can't sacrifice documentation for efficiency. You can't say that to achieve our target, achieve our deadline, we reduce our documentation, we were unable to do the documentation. You can't say that. අපිට කියන්න බෑ අපි deadline එකට වේගෙන් වැඩ කරපු නිසා මේ අපිට document කරගන්න බැරි වුණා, සේරම තියෙන්නේ හිතේ තමයි කියලා. එහෙම කියන්න බෑ. මොකද මේ audit file එක regulator review කරන්න පුළුවන්. මේ audit file එක /MB එක monitoring board එක review කරන්න පුළුවන්. මේ audit file එක global review එකක්. ඒ කියන්නේ big 4 firms වල global review වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ review එකක් එන්න පුළුවන්. ඊට පස්සේ අපි group audit එකක නම් component audit එකක් නම් අපි කරන්නේ group audit ඇවිල්ලා review කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඊට අමතරව අපි ඊළඟ අවුරුද්දේ මේ audit එක මාරුනොත් අලුත් audit ඇවිල්ලා අපේ audit file එක review කරන්න පුළුවන්. So then our audit file and මොනවාද FCID එක අපේ audit file එක review කරන්න පුළුවන්. So then different scenarios are there to present our audit evidence. Audit evidence in the sense, so the what is the ground, what are the judgment, what are the conclusion based on our audit opinion. So then to support to the audit opinion, we should gather sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. Audit evidence. We need to ensure that we need to keep proper documentation, right? And then it's a support to the engagement team to evaluate, do a gap analysis. Once you are having proper planning documentation, you can execute, you can conclude, right? So then that can be used for the next year audit as well. After having proper documentation last year, the upcoming auditor can read that and get a good guidance from the last year audit file. So it's a kind of a support for the next year audit, right? And then it is a support for the supervisory task to supervise, to manage the engagement. It's a tool we can use, the documentation. Without having documentation, it's really difficult to review audit evidence, right? So then in an audit firm, we are having multiple audits. So then having proper documentation only we can manage our task, because that some of the audit team members will be allocated for different audit teams, right? So after having given time period, some of the instance, once you are reviewing, final review will be done at the last stage. At that moment, some of the audit member can be transferred to another audit team. So then that team member should make sure to have a proper documentation in the audit file. Otherwise, a manager as well as that audit individual, that audit team member will stuck in the middle. මොකද එයා audit file එක හරියට හදලා නැත්නම්, audit file එක හරියට properly document කරලා නැත්නම්, එතකොට එයා current audit එකේත් වැඩ කරන්න වෙනවා, මේ audit manager ගේ වැඩ කරන්නත් වෙනවා. එහෙනම් හොඳ audit team player කෙනෙක් නම් හොඳ documentation එකක් කරලා audit file එක හරියට හදන්න ඕන. right. තව මොනවද? Supervision can be done easily, and then internal reviews can be done easily, and then as I discussed, for the next year audit it will be a good help to have a proper documentation. ඊළඟ අවුරුද්දේ audit එක කරන කෙනාට හොඳ guidance එකක් ගන්න පුළුවන්. ඊට පස්සේ අපි කතා කරා වගේ potential external reviews. අපිට litigation එක කියන්නේ inspection වෙන්න පුළුවන්, due diligence වෙන්න පුළුවන්, අපිට regulatory review වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒකට අපිට submit කරන්න වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඊට පස්සේ අපිට audit documentation එකකට document වෙනවා කියලා කිව්වම audit team members ලා accountable වෙනවා. තමන්ගේ task එක හරියට කරන්න. That's a kind of a motivation, kind of a push to do kind of a quality audit work. So altogether, these are the requirements and these are the benefits of a proper documentation. As a whole, we can say that it's a part of quality audit. So then, if we are expecting a quality audit, documentation is a core part. As I mentioned previously, documentation can't be sacrificed for the efficiency. අපිට කියන්න බෑ audit එක ඉක්මනට කරන්න, client ගේ deadline එක achieve කරගන්න documentation කරේ නැහැ කියලා. It's a must. It's a legal, it's a standard requirement, right? So that's the importance and the benefits of a audit documentation. So then here we are discussing about what are the areas, factors we need to focus about to decide audit documentation. Actually, once you are doing your audit documentation, because of these factors, the gravity and the way you are doing the audit documentation may be changed. So audit documentation whole process එක වෙනස් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. එක factors එක industry එක විදියට and company එකේ nature එක විදියට and company එකේ size එක complexity එක base කරගෙන audit documentation change වෙන්න පුළුවන්. classic example එකක් තමයි listed company එක documentation එක private limited company එක documentation එකකට වඩා වෙනස්. මොකද listed company එක අපි regulatory aspect check කරනවා, ගොඩක් check කරන්න areas තියෙනවා. Private limited company එක with comparing to that company may be less, right? තව company එකක් තියෙනවා IT related. So then they are using kind of a virtual environment, virtual office concept. They don't have physical documents. Fully e-files are there. So then, and that company with a kind of a small company, totally different, right? So that's what that about the company, based on the nature of the company, based on the nature of the industry, complexity, size of the entity will impact to the audit documentation. ඊට අමතර audit procedures වල nature එක දැන් අපි as we discuss under execution stage අපි audit inventory count එකක් කරන විදිය company එකෙන් company එකට වෙනස් වෙනවා. අපි textiles manufacturing company එකක විදියට නෙමෙයි hardware එකක කරන්නේ. ඒතකොට ඒ documentation එක වෙනස් වෙනවා. So then according to the risk level, identified risk, the documentation aspect may be changed. එතකොට inventory significant account එකක් වෙන file එකක inventory වලට ලොකු section එකක් තියෙනවා. bank එකක inventory documentation එක අඩු වෙන්න පුළුවන් because there's no significant risk relating to inventory relating to a bank. That's based on the industry, right? And then the gravity, the significance of audit evidence we gathered and the nature and extent exception identified. So then whatever the audit identified exemptions, scope limitations or misstatements, the nature and the extent of these findings may change your documentation. or ආගේ audit file එකේ ගොඩාක් audit finding තියෙනවා නම් එතකොට ඒ audit finding වලට support කරන්න ගොඩාක් audit evidence අපිට attach කරන්න වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ගොඩාක් conclusion වලට එන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ audit client ගේ control environment එක හොඳයි. ඒ control environment එකේ මොනවද financial reporting aspect එක හොඳයි. ඕනම analysis එකට reason තියෙනවා. එතකොට ගොඩක් audit finding අඩුයි. audit finding අඩු වෙනකොට අපේ documentation වල තියෙන complexity එකත් අඩු වෙන්න පුළුවන්. So then those are the aspect will impact to the audit documentation. And other thing is, once you are having audit evidence වල තියෙන දේ එකපාර බලලා තේරුම් ගන්න බැරි නම් අපි හැමදේම conclude කරලා conclusion එකක් විදියට දෙන්න ඕන නම්, so එතකොට අපිට audit evidence straight away audit evidence උත් file කරන්න ඕන, conclusion separately conclusion documents වල document කරන්න වෙනවා. And then the methods we are using, different approaches we are using, whether we are using alternative audit procedures, whether using audit approach, those will be impacted. So audit approach එකත් directly impact වෙනවා. අපි TOC කරනවද, TOC with substantive procedures කරනවද, ඒ අනුව වා TOC document කරන්න ඕනද නැද්ද කියලා depend වෙනවා. ඊට පස්සේ වා මේ IT related support එකක් ගන්නවද, අපි valuers ලා සම්බන්ධ කරගන්නවද, actuary ලා සම්බන්ධ කරගන්නවද, internal audit එකේ support එක ගන්නවද කියන aspect ගොඩාක් impact වෙනවා audit documentation එකට. ඊට පස්සේ audit methodology and the tool, whether you are using sampling tools or kind of a tool for analytics or JE analyzer or any other tools we are using. So then kind of a mechanism, the audit mechanism will be impact to the overall audit documentation. එතකොට වාගේ audit firm එකේ audit record කරන tool එකක් තියෙනවද, ඔයා hard copy විතරද use කරන්නේ. එතකොට big 4 firm වල නම් audit tool එකක් තියෙනවා. එතකොට audit tool එක virtual office එකක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්, ඒක web based tool එකක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. එතකොට ඒකේ ඕනම team member කෙනෙකුට එක virtual office එකක් ඇතුලේ audit project එකක් ඇතුලේ වැඩ කරන්න පුළුවන්. එතකොට එකම document එක ඇතුලේ වැඩ කරන්න පුළුවන්. දැන් අපිට තියෙනවා share folder access කියන්නේ එකම audit Excel workbook එකක දෙන්නෙක්ට වැඩ කරන්න පුළුවන් common location එකක save කරලා. So that those can be kind of a advanced technological aspect we can use for the particular audit. So then whatever the technology, tools, methodology you are using for that audit will directly impact for the audit documentation. So that enhance the quality of audit documentation. So then I assume that you are clear with this. So audit එකේ audit documentation වලට impact වෙනවා. ඒ audit එකේ nature එක, industry එක, compliance requirement, risk එක, and whether they are having proper internal control setup, all those aspects will be impact to their audit documentation. And other thing is the experience in the audit team and the qualification, and then there are the capabilities to do proper documentation. ඒක හරියට document කරලා summary කරලා document කරන්න ability එක දන්නේ නැහැ. ඔයා detail ගොඩක් unnecessary documents දානවා audit file එකට. අපි මේ client ගේ auditee ගේ portfolios print out දාලා audit file එකට දානවා. unnecessary documents ගොඩාක් audit file එකට දානවා. ඒකේ point එකක් නැහැ. unnecessary document එකක් දානවා කියන්නේ it's creating another risk. Another risk කියලා කියන්නේ confidential information වෙන්න පුළුවන්. audit file එකක් එහෙම confidential information එක මොන හරි අපිට මේ misplace වුණොත් ඒක ලොකු threat එකක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. So then we have to be very careful. Once you are keeping your documents, you have to be having good the proper experience about how we are going to document. So then whatever the relevant documents we need to keep, right? So then having kind of a proper documentation mean it is not a meaning of having more documents, right? Excess documentation is not it's an inefficiency. We need to have very summarized, very precise documentation. So then only any third party reviewer or a manager, senior manager or partner can easily review, right? නැත්නම් ඔයාට මොකද්ද වෙන්නේ? audit file එකත් එක්කම යන්න වෙනවා හැම තැනටම explain කරන්න. document කරපු දේ explain කරන්නත් ඕන නම් it's not a proper documentation, right? So then these are the key aspect will impact to the audit documentation, right.